Well, hello, I'm here with Doug to talk about many things, including growing resistance. And it's Friday, March 14, 2025. And the big stories, in my opinion, in the last few days have been the political ones. And probably the most interesting one, I'm going to share an image here, if I can find the right button. Yeah, share.
Okay.
There. This is from the Wall Street Journal and very impressive. It shows the first 90 days after the election in 2016, where after the election, the stock market jumped up by like 5%. And after Trump got in office, it went up by like another 5%, up to 10 or 12% up. And now it did almost nothing after the election, but as soon as Trump gets in office, it drops precipitously. So now it's at minus 4%, as opposed to being plus 11 or 12%. So, and of course, the Wall Street Journal is very, very angry, saying, hey, we thought you were going to be good for business. What is this shit? And that's why I think the Republicans even are getting annoyed by Trump. The business people are getting annoyed by Trump, saying, we thought you were going to do pro-business policies, and you're invading Canada. What is this shit? So
Well,
anyway,
Sam, it is good business
it
for
isn't
the
just,
people who are selling short.
well, yes. And the fact that he keeps doing it in fits and starts, where he declares tariffs, the economy crashes, then a couple of days later he says, "Oh, never mind, I won't do the tariffs," and it comes back. I've read several people that say he's probably like doing it deliberately to move the market to tell his buddies to sell short for a few days. I don't know if that's true, but it's certainly true that in general, he's destroying the economy for no reason at all. I mean, it's falling like it did during COVID for no reason, just due
Yeah.
to his appalling policies, which is just amazing. So, and now I'm glad to see there were two judgments just yesterday by judges finally saying this is all crap. Elon Musk has no right to fire anybody. You have to rehire everybody you fired. All the provisional appointments that all the VA, Defense Department, and all the other agencies, these people are not legally fired. You have to bring them back, which is, it's all been illegal all along. Like, I think it's funny. I remember Jimmy Kimmel said, Elon Musk is just firing people. I'm just going to go into Chipotle and say, okay, you're fired. It makes just as much sense.
Well, there were some YouTube prankers that would do that at Walmart. They would go in, they'd find an employee, they'd hold a clipboard, and they'd walk up to him and say, "We're sorry, but you're fired."
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and this judge said that in particular, you've been firing them for cause, for bad performance, which means they don't even get unemployment. And it's all a lie. They had performance reviews that said they're doing fine, and then you issue them a form letter that says we're firing you for bad performance. So they're doing it in like the worst possible way, the most vindictive way, just to hurt people. The cruelty is the point. Like most Republican actions, they just love hurting people.
Yeah,
Anyway,
yeah.
and so that was pretty interesting, and the judge is finally pushing back, and so Chuck Schumer has now decided he's going to support the Republican funding bill, which cuts $880 in Medicaid and other things. So Democrats are rebelling against him, led by Ocasio-Cortez. And I think she's right. I mean, now is the time to stand up against this Nazi regime in every way possible. And it's okay for Democrats to shut down the government to do that, since he's just using the government to hurt people. Anyway, I think she's right, and Chuck Schumer's wrong. That collaborating with them is not the right move. He says, "Go shutting down the government will hurt people," but I think supporting the Trump regime will hurt more people. But it took me a while to make that decision. And so Gavin Newsom, our governor, I thought he might be a candidate for president. I thought he was doing pretty well, but he's destroyed himself utterly. He had a podcast called Politic, and it was just an ordinary podcast. But a few days ago, he started a new podcast that's just him, and he is red pilled. His first three guests are all far right popular influencers, and he's making buddies with them. This is Charlie Kirk, Michael Savage, and Steve Bannon. So the most
Uh-oh.
far right people. He has each one of them in, and he makes buddies with each of them. So Mike Charlie Kirk comes in, and Gavin Newsom says, "Yeah, we really shouldn't defend trans rights. We got to kick trans people out of sports. You're right about that." And Michael Savage is an anti-Semite. I think he said we had to kill 100,000 Muslims. That would make the world better and stuff like that. That's his buddy too. And Steve Bannon, of course, the architect of Trump's first term and most of what he's doing now. Steve Bannon led to the current rush of orders. He said we have to achieve muzzle velocity with all the orders coming out. So apparently Gavin Newsom thinks that a Democrat who gets red pilled and starts compromising with Republicans is going to be the winning ticket. And Charles, uh, the guy from West Virginia, tried that. And the point is, he doesn't understand something very simple. When there's a battle, you can be on one side or the other. If you move to the middle, everybody hates you. So the Democrats are going to hate him for betraying them, and the Republicans will never accept him. He's
Yeah.
so I think his political career is over, and I think he's just going to be a second string commentator on Newsmax before long. I think this is a terrible move. Quite a few Democrats are trying this. How about we move, 10% to the right? Will people love us then? And I already think I know the answer. No, nobody will thank you for doing that.
Yeah. Sam, speaking of people in politics, what's happened to Marjorie Taylor Greene?
Oh, she's still around, still saying horrible things. In fact, she's one of my
What?
stories.
Oh, okay.
She wants to make protesting Tesla. She wants to make vandalizing a Tesla car into a domestic terrorism act,
Oh, hmm.
which the Republicans are getting on board with. Because, the vital national security, every Tesla car is vital national security infrastructure.
I see. Okay.
And I'll be at the protests at Tesla dealerships tomorrow. They have a resistance movement that is really bothering Elon Musk. So that means it's working. He's down to accusing the woman who helped create this movement of being like paid by George Soros and stuff. So, and he's on TV in chairs saying my price was falling, and he paid Donald Trump $100 million to do a commercial for Tesla at the White House.
Really?
Oh yeah, Donald Trump said I'll buy a Tesla, except of course, there's a little detail that I don't drive. I haven't driven in years, but anyway, I'm going to buy a Tesla. And he shows him getting in the Tesla, and he had to give him a chart to read off the prices of Tesla, like, TV infomercial.
So is this commercial gone live?
Oh yeah, it's all over the news. I don't think it's not exactly a commercial. It's a press briefing,
Oh, a
but
press
it's on all the
briefing.
news. But that's what it was. It was Trump. Trump's done this all along in Fragrant Virus and the Hacked Act. Remember the first time he had cans of beans on the Resolute desk? He was saying, you should buy Goya beans. He's just a TV huckster. He always has been. And you're not
Yeah.
supposed to do
Yeah.
that in the White House, but nobody seems to enforce the Hatch Act. So, I mean, you just get reality TV hucksterism out of him all the time.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So, what have you got?
Well, today is the 3rd of March, or sorry, 14th of March.
Right.
So this is known as Pi Day. Why is it called Pi Day? P-I, or
Well,
you could call it PIE, but most people know it as Pi Day. The reason being,
because it's the most common approximation of pi is 3.14.
yeah, but it's a way of recognizing math.
I guess. I mean, all right.
And I kind of looked this up. It's kind of interesting. I guess in around the 1980s or so, Congress said we need to celebrate math in our country.
Remember, I think about a century ago, one of the states tried to rule that pi was 3 or 4 or something.
Yeah, I kind of remember that.
Tried to legislate it, saying, this is confusing our kids. What is this transcendental number shit? From now on, pi is 3.
Yeah, yeah, it's too complex.
Well, it is kind of complex. They're right. But, you can't, there's some problems you can't fix from the legislature.
Yeah, Sam, I'm just looking here. It was first recognized in 1988, and it's called Pi Approximation Date.
Yeah.
And it started in San Francisco at the Exploratorium.
Oh, well,
And do you know Larry Shaw? I don't know who that is.
no, I don't.
He's an American physicist, and he worked at the Exploratorium for 33 years.
Well, I remember when I was a kid, museums were like dull places where you'd look at a dusty old locomotive, and they've gotten a lot better. Like we went to the Computer History Museum, and that was great. And the
Yeah.
Exploratorium is great. There's all these interesting, there's some really impressive museums, and the Exploratorium is one of them.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know if you know this, but its founder was Frank Oppenheimer.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh, you didn't know that?
No.
So that's Robert Oppenheimer of the Manhattan Project frame.
Yeah.
That's his brother.
Yeah. Well, it's very good for science awareness. You kids can watch.
Yeah.
Remember, I went there, and they had this focusing sound demonstration. They had like this 10-foot ball full of like carbon dioxide. And you could sit in a chair on one side of it and talk, and it would focus the sound to a person sitting across the room. Very cool. Lots of cool things there.
Yeah. I don't know if you know, but in the train station in where is it? In Washington, D.C., I think, or New York.
Yeah.
They built a marble build or a stone building, and you can stand in one corner and whisper, and on
Yeah.
the other side it can be heard. And
It's true of some buildings at the Vatican too. This has been known for centuries. There's a place you can stand and you can hear what people are saying in the confessional.
yeah, that's pretty funny. It's also, I believe, in Congress. There's a place where somebody recognized that and would have the opposition stand in that corner. They'd be on the other side of the room and
Yeah.
be able to hear them clearly.
Yeah. Yep. The thing about these artistic curved walls are like lenses that focus the light,
Exactly,
focus the
exactly.
sound. Yeah. Yeah. Very cool.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's interesting.
Yeah.
So Pi Day,
Yep. Pi Day. All right. I and so
what's next? What's
I
next on your agenda? What's
well
next in your pie?
it's colleges. As you know, the Republicans are ending the entire Department of Education, and this will end the Pell Grants and the funding that drives most of our colleges. You and I will probably be out on the street. And University of Massachusetts has disbanded their entire entering biomedical medical graduate class. They canceled all the
What?
people that have been accepted. They said, forget it, we're not letting anybody in because all the funding is going to be cut. So there will be no class of biomedical students anymore. And I think many
Okay.
other colleges are going to do the same thing. Like I say, I imagine City Colleges, I think, relies primarily on federal funding and Pell Grants. So I think they'll, uh, unless the state picks up the slack, and the state can't because Trump is denying the state money for the LA fires. So I think the future of higher education is very, very bleak. And anyway, this reminds me of the UC Berkeley loyalty oath because, when the political pressure hits college administrators, they lie down and fold in practice. And the loyalty oath was the last example. When McCarthy, Trump's predecessor, did the same kind of shit about communism in the 50s. Berkeley forced every professor to sign a loyalty oath. And what
Right.
happened is every good professor who could get another job left. They lost all the smart people. It degraded Berkeley's intellect very far to where they didn't have people to be proud of anymore. So a financier named Miller started a special fund to fund graduate students to go to UC Berkeley to try to raise a new crop of smart people to work there. And I was eventually one of them. I was the Miller Fellow at UC Berkeley in like the 90s or the early 2000s, I think the 80s or 90s. And I didn't know until I got there the history of this fund, but that's why it existed, because they needed to replenish all the professors that left over being forced to sign promising that they weren't communist. Anyway,
So was that was called the Miller Oath or
it was called
Miller
the
Fund?
Berkeley Loyalty Oath, and the
Right.
response was called the Miller Fund. He was like a banker or something, and he donated a bunch of money to make a fund to fund grad students going to UC Berkeley.
So kind of like a Bezos or a
Yeah,
Elon Musk or
yeah,
I
he
mean
was that he was that way in his time, and so he wanted to support UC Berkeley. So he donated a bunch of money, form a persistent endowment, and they take like 20 grad students a year, and they get like a 2-year appointment to go to UC Berkeley and do grad work there, which I did.
wow.
And one of the funny things about it is when I got there, they had meetings about how to do your Miller Fellowship. And one of the things they told us is don't pay any tax. I said, what? They said, yeah, we give you this page, this thing, like 20 pages long. One of the previous Miller Fellows a couple decades ago figured out that this award is like the Nobel Prize. I said, it's like the Nobel Prize. They said, yes, it is. Therefore, it's not taxable. And I said, that sounds really bogus. They say, don't rock the boat. Don't argue. What you do is you just attach these 20 pages and say, based on the argument in these 20 pages, I don't have to pay taxes. And then they said, if you're wrong, you're not committing a crime. You just have to pay the back taxes. So that convinced me to do it. And it went through. But he had some argument that somehow this fell into the same legal status as the Nobel Prize. So anyway, it was nice. I
So,
got to go to UC Berkeley. They paid for me a couple of years there, which was a good thing.
yeah, so here it was, let's see, established the Miller Institute for Basic Research and
Yeah,
Science,
yeah.
established at UC Berkeley 1955 after Adolph C. Miller and his wife Sprague. Is it
And
Miller?
at
Yeah,
one of these meetings, people asked, "What was Miller like?" And they have a picture of him with this. He looks like this stern banker, this
he
fat guy
does.
glaring at things. And they said, he wasn't a warm man."
Wow. He was a graduate and professor of economics. And he was a member of the Federal Reserve Board from 1914
Right?
to 1936.
Yeah, an important
But
banker. Who else would have all the money? He sounds like
yeah,
he was the oligarch of his day.
yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
I never heard of that.
No, I never heard of it. It's funny, when I got there, everybody thought the Miller Fellowship was funded by Miller Beer. That's what they,
It's
and
interest.
they kept trying to
Yeah.
push it up and say it was like a Harvard Junior Fellow, which is famous. They consider it the West Coast equivalent of the Harvard Junior Fellow, and they're real frustrated that it doesn't get anything like that respect. Nobody has heard of it. Nobody cares. They had all these special events where you're supposed to wear fancy clothes and pose for the pictures, like the Harvard Junior Fellows do, and nobody would do it. And the Berkeley people are frustrated that they don't get the prestige for this that the Harvard people get for their East Coast similar program. Anyway,
Yeah, it's interesting, Sam. There's the Miller Institute Knot. Are you familiar with that?
I don't know that one.
KNOT.
Oh, no, I don't know that at all.
And let's see, I'm just reading this. Um, it's based on, I guess, a micrograph of DNA,
Oh,
and it's a six-noded knot that again goes back, and that's kind of the symbol that's used.
oh yeah, it was some funny symbol. I didn't know what that was. Oh, by the way,
Yeah.
in World of
Yeah.
Science, RFK Jr. has this
Yes.
interesting scientific argument. See, what's better than the vaccine for measles is
Wait.
if you catch measles. If you catch measles, you get better immunization against measles. So the best way to stop measles is if everybody would get measles. That's what he's saying now. So there's like a
Wait.
this is the best way to prevent measles because then everyone would get strong immunity.
What about the people that die?
I know that's the problem. If the point was to prevent measles, how is this preventing measles?
So,
But that's his position now. And of course, it's true that if you
it
caught,
is.
I mean, when I was a kid, I had measles. I was looking, do I need to get the vaccine? They said, oh, no, if you had measles, you don't need to get the vaccine. You got immunity. I said, well, okay. But of course, that overlooks the fact that you were trying to prevent measles.
Yeah, and it also overlooks that I believe the other diseases like
The other things you die after getting measles.
hearing loss and I think vision loss,
Yeah.
and that occurs at about, I think at a rate of around 1 in 100,000 people.
Yeah. I mean, that's the
So
point. The fact that I
yeah,
had measles means that a whole bunch of people of my generation probably had terrible outcomes like dying from it. Which is what we're trying to prevent. Yeah, this is like, if you run through gunfire at Normandy and you get through, you could say, there, I'm immune to gunfire now. And I said, well, I wouldn't exactly say that. Everybody should run through gunfire. It would be good for them, you know. Anyway, that's in charge of our medical establishment now. So anyway, uh,
Yeah, Sam, that's a really good analogy.
yeah, yeah,
It's D-Day and you got to storm the beach.
yeah,
And if you live, there's proof that it works.
yeah, that's right. Everybody should do that. This is so great now that I lived, you know. Anyway, uh, so anyway, then I got some InfoSec stories.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
So researchers decided to test AI models by giving them a quote from a reference work and saying, which reference work did this come from? They really don't do well at all of that. They have perplexity, gives you the wrong answer 37% of the time. ChatGPT gives you the wrong answer 67% of the time. And Elon Musk's Grok gives you the wrong answer 94% of the time. And if you pay for the premium models, they're even worse than the free models. So
Well,
that's pretty impressive.
Sam, wait, you're looking at this the wrong way.
Yeah.
You got to turn the numbers around to look at how positive it is. 30% of the time it gets it right.
Except for Elon
To,
Musk that gets it right 6% of the time,
yeah, 6% of the time.
which, by the way, is the same approval rate for many of their recent policies. They asked people, how much do you trust Putin? And the answer is like 6%. They asked you, how many of you actually want to cancel the Department of Education? And the popularity is like 30%. Something else that he did that had like a 6% approval rate. Um, I forget what it was. If some of this stuff firing all the workers or something. Anyway, uh, for a populist administration, they're doing a lot of really unpopular things. Anyway,
Well, since this seems to be Comedy Friday, I've got a story for you.
yeah,
And Sam, I want to know how we missed this.
yeah,
So, there was a movie Wicked that came out,
yeah,
incredibly popular. This is
yeah.
back in November.
I hear people praising it like crazy. I haven't watched it, but everybody seems to love it.
Yeah, so Mattel tried to cash in on this and they came up with Wicked Barbies,
Right.
dolls.
I would figure that would be it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And, here they boxed it up really pretty and they started selling them or shipping them until somebody said, "Oh, you know, you mixed up on the box wicked.com,
Oh,
which
yeah.
is the porn site,
I know that one.
with wickedmovie.com.
That's right.
Oops."
Yep. Yep. So they sold a bunch of dolls with porn site URLs on them. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is like the Wicked Bible that was published about 500 years ago, where they left out a word.
Oh,
You don't know
that's
about
right. No,
this?
I did hear about that. It was a Bible.
Yeah.
They removed like the word "not" from a sentence that was
Oh, they
very
didn't
important.
remove it. They just forgot it.
Yeah, but it was some word like "don't do evil things," and now it says "do evil things" or something like
No, no, it's even better.
that.
It's instead of thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife,
Oh,
thou shalt covet
yeah.
thy neighbor's wife.
Yeah, there's reason why generations of monks, there was a whole thing when you copied the the Talmud, you would have to like take a ritual bath before writing the name of God, and everything had to be checked. And they managed to preserve like the Jewish Holy Scriptures for like 1,000 years with only a few errors by this extensive process of careful error correction.
But but there's still errors.
Well, that's right. Nothing's perfect.
Yeah,
But,
yeah,
uh,
yeah.
but they really, before computers, they developed a sort of, system of checks and balances to do it, which impressed me when I worked in finance. That's one of the things I found very interesting. We had thousands of people getting hundreds of thousands of mail, typing in the information from the mail, and we had a whole system of entering it and then checking it, and a special way of checking all the financial databases to make sure they were right. It was really effective. I was very impressed you can do this. You can do accounting so it's actually right and you don't make mistakes. Anyway, um,
Yeah. Okay. All
so
right. What's next on your agenda here?
Manus, there is a thing. Okay, so Chinese brought out DeepSeek about a month ago, which is this AI model that rocked the world because it was really good and it jumped AI models forward. Now they brought out AI agent, a free product that can do things for you based on large language models, and it's called Manus. It's called it's And the Manus is the agent that will do things for you, And one of the tools that works with it is called browser use. And what this does is it takes your web browser, which is full of interface elements designed for a human, like drop-down lists and things you have to click on and forms, and it turns them all into machine controllable features so the AI can control your browser. So
Okay.
with these open source stuff, you can make the agents, which is what everybody's been talking about for a year, where you'll have an agent that says, "Hey, plan my schedule for next month. I want to take a vacation. I want to have a date at this restaurant. Don't forget my medical appointments and read the emails from my mother and figure out when I'm supposed to visit her. And we'll figure out that stuff and make all the reservations and everything for you." That's the idea. But in order to do
Okay.
that, it has to navigate like drop down menus and filling your credit card number on forms and stuff. And apparently, this is the tool that can do that. So everyone is very excited about it.
I see. I
So
see.
that's the wave of the future.
Okay.
And there's another one which I was pretty entertained because I actually did a lot of research on this and gave a talk at DEF CON. These guys went and downloaded 156,000 iOS apps and analyzed them. It sounds like they didn't do anything more than just run strings on them, and they found 815,000 hard-coded secrets, including thousands of very sensitive ones, um, like cloud storage API keys, Microsoft Cloud keys, payment processor keys, and unprotected endpoints. I remember every time I look at an app,
Uh,
I'd find all these things. The thing is, I wasn't able to determine how sensitive they are. Some of them are harmless, like there's a Google Map API key that is used to display a map to your store, but some of them actually mean you're logging in. And that's when I didn't pursue it because I found them, but I didn't know how to sort them into the important ones and the unimportant ones. But apparently they're all pretty bad. And I know mobile apps in general are a security disaster. They're really sleazy practices. I mean, but what I did mostly was watch how they store passwords. And the main thing is they store passwords, which is fundamentally stupid. You just shouldn't do it at all. And if you're going,
yeah.
there are less harmful ways to do it, and that's not what they do. They either store them in plain text or they store them with private key encryption, and then they try to hide the key on your phone. This is not a good plan.
Right.
And you know, every phone operating system provides a secure storage vault. There's iOS keychain, and there's an equivalent thing in Android. They're provided an encrypted place to put secrets, which you could use, and they just don't use it. So anyway, um, then there's a
Oh
couple
boy.
of there are a couple other AI things that are pretty fun. There's a thing called Rogue, which is an intelligence web vulnerability scanner powered by large language models. So I got to try this and see if it works. Because web vuln scanners are pretty bad because, like browser AI, they usually can't navigate websites very well. They really can't fill out forms, answer captchas, and all that. Um, and there's another one called the
Hmm.
Zero Probe Enumeration Framework, which they say is an advanced enumeration and analysis framework designed for exploit developers and red teamers. It will identify security vulnerabilities, analyze system protections, and facilitate exploit development. So they both sound like pretty interesting tools to start playing with. See how
Yeah.
good they are. And the last
Interesting.
thing I got is kind of a retraction. We talked a while ago about Microsoft's new quantum computer chip. And
Yes.
it turns out that these Majorana particles were theorized in the 30s, and nobody's ever proven they exist. And Microsoft claimed we've got them, and we're using them to do quantum computing. And all the physicists have cried foul and said, wait a minute. You don't really have Majorana particles. You've done a couple of measurements that make you think you have them, but you haven't proven that you've really found these things. It's a whole lot harder than you think. And all your claims are pretty much garbage. And Microsoft said, oh no, we have better evidence proving we're right that's coming out pretty soon that we haven't told you about yet. So there's a battle. It's the physicists are pushing back, saying that Microsoft is just exaggerating their accomplishment. So I guess we're going to find out.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah. Well,
So you know, this is sort of Elizabeth Holmes' claim that first they reject you, then they
oh yeah,
accept
but
you.
she actually got a bunch of money by lying to people, which is what got her in trouble. This reminds me of
Right.
cold fusion. When I was in grad school,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, they had the university in Utah claimed they had room temperature fusion. And everybody said, oh, that's impossible. They said, yeah, it really worked. And so for a while, everybody, like a year, trying to reproduce it. Nobody could reproduce it. This happens. Happened to CanSec West. This guy, Dragos, that runs CanSec West, said, I bought a new Mac and it was infected immediately. Some over-the-air thing infected it before I plugged it into anything. And everybody said, nah, that's not possible. And he had some logs and traces which he claimed proved this. And for about a year, everybody tried to figure out if it was real, and it just seemed to fade away. Uh, you know, that's the thing. There's a whole journal of irreproducible results. This is a well-known thing in science. There's a lot of things that happen once that you can't make it happen again, and you just don't know what to make of it.
Yeah, yeah. And Sam, years ago there was an election in Europe. I forgot where there were more votes using an electronic voting machine than there were people who lived in the area that the voting was taking place in.
So something
And
went wrong. Yeah.
well, what they finally realized is, or surmised, because it's not reproducible, is it was a cosmic ray flipped a bit in one of the chips. And if you look at the numbers, it was an exact power of two that was the overvotes for one candidate.
Yeah, a lot of things could cause that. The first thing I would think is some kind of human error. I think that's happened a bunch of times where they add in the same district twice or something by accident. But
Yeah, well, yeah, well, as a result of that, or it's something that IBM has known about, that at higher altitudes there are more errors in computers than at sea level.
yeah, well,
So,
I remember Microsoft Excel for like 20 years had a flaw where if you added certain numbers together, you get the wrong total. That was
yeah,
pretty.
but that was reproducible.
It was, yeah, it was,
Yeah,
yeah. These non-reproducible things this is where I used to get in trouble. I'd argue with people about this. I say science is not that different than religion because we invent this thing that doesn't really exist called the reproducible experiment. And then we pretend there's a reality defined by that thing and that the other stuff doesn't count. And this is makes just about as much sense as postulating there's a loving God taking care of me. I mean, it's just an unprovable assumption. Then you base your worldview on it.
yeah,
Because, of course, there's no reproducible experiment. You never have the same conditions again.
that's
So
right.
that's like this is what Plato said. He said, people think they know what a circle is and a straight line, but you've never seen a circle or a straight line. All you see are very imperfect approximations down here. So why do you have this concept of a perfect circle? Where did that come from? It must have been there before you were born. There must be this world of ideals, and that turns out to be sort of true. Our brains are wired to perceive certain patterns even though you
Right.
never exactly see them. That's why I remember when I was a kid, the general tells me I'd look at like the bathroom tiles and they would form shapes in my mind, like squares and plus signs and triangles. You look at just sort of any random pattern and your mind will put things in it. Like look at the clouds and you'll see like faces and animals and stuff. So there clearly are pattern receptors in our brain that trigger when you see something close enough to a pattern and then you recognize it. And ultimately, that's what you want, right? Because, this is a problem with self-driving cars. If you try to drive and you look out there and it's like foggy or raining, you can still tell the cars from the people, but the AI can't because the actual visual signal of a person in fog is not very much like a person outside fog. So if you didn't train it on fog, it can't see anything. And we
Yeah.
can do that because we really have a very complex visual system to detect patterns even in the presence of a lot of noise and obscuring things and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. We have the ability to sort that out.
Right. We've adapted for
Yeah.
that. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
I remember they say this is why we have two eyes, is because we were foragers and you have to like pick berries and grubs off a tree and pick it through the leaves and stuff. You need three-dimensional vision for that.
And if you're trying to hunt something, you need to know what the distance is.
Well, yeah,
Um,
but I think you don't normally your three-dimensional vision. Well, yeah, it's mainly for arm's length. I think that's what we evolved for. I think projectile weapons were not what we were evolved for. So you really only evolved for what you can do, what you can reach.
I see. I see. All right.
Yeah. Anyway,
So speaking of, you brought up self-driving cars.
yeah, yeah.
So Waymo is about ready to expand into Silicon Valley.
Everybody seems to love it. I've been to a few cities where they have it. People ride it. They say it's great.
Huh. Interesting.
My
Never
students,
been in one.
I
Seen
haven't,
them
but my
drive by.
students
Yeah.
ride them here, and I saw them in Arizona. And the people say this thing is great. I ride it all the time. This is better than a taxi. My students like it because if you do it at a certain time, it's cheaper. And they say it's real peaceful. It goes slow. You don't have to make conversation with the driver. It's cautious and careful, and I can just relax and read my book or do something. As in, taxis are not relaxing. I've noticed that.
Yeah, you know, I've kind of noticed that too. You're a bit more anxious in a taxi.
A lot more when I've been riding taxis. And
Yeah,
I'm not in a hurry. It would be fine with me if it took an extra 10 minutes to get there and just went slow and careful. That would be just fine.
yeah, yeah. Interesting, huh?
Yeah.
All right, well, that's it for me on this
Yeah.
Pi Day.
Yeah, that's it for me too. All right. So I'll have another one on Tuesday.
Sounds good to me.
Okay. Got to find the right button. Where the heck is the record button? Technology is so confusing. I got a react button instead of a record button. All right, let me give one more try, and then I'll just have to kill the whole session. It's the only way to make it stop. It really has taken away my record button.
So there's a new version of Zoom that just came out, and my buttons have moved around too.
Yeah, well, they
But you,
seem to have taken away. Let me just try making the window bigger. But I think probably because I shared the screen, the record button has, oh, there it is. I found it. Okay.